Well, the weekend at Wrigley was not kind to the St. Louis Cardinals, and now the onus is upon the front office to potentially do something about it. We'll talk about the struggles for the Cardinals rotation and whether it's time for John Mozeliak to act, coming up on b-schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Monday, July 7th, 2025. I hope everybody out there had a safe and healthy holiday weekend for 4th of July. I was out at the family farm in northern Missouri and didn't make it to the podcast studio over the weekend series as the Cardinals dropped 2 of 3 to the Cubs. But we're here Monday to recap things and to talk about the current state of affairs as the Cardinals are in a bind right now. Yes, they won Game 2 on Saturday thanks to the offensive eruption with the wind blowing out and helping out in that capacity. Cardinals had a few home runs and a key swing by Joel Pozo to help pace the emotional victory. But it was the only one the Cardinals got over the Cubs over the weekend, and of the Cardinals' past 5 games against the Cubbies, St. Louis has dropped 4 of those 5. And right now, for as much as the offense is going to have to turn things around, I don't know that there's much to evaluate and break down when it comes to the offensive struggles. They haven't been able to hit left-handed pitching. Matthew Boyd had his way against St. Louis and the Cardinal lineup on Sunday with 9 strikeouts in 5 innings. The part I want to talk about is the pitching, the starting rotation in particular, because even though the bullpen has also really struggled for the Cardinals of late, I don't know that there's a whole lot to be done about the bullpen issues either, other than churning through some potential relievers from AAA Memphis, which is something the Cardinals have already been doing this year. We have seen times where guys like Kyle Leahy, Steven Matz, Jojo Romero, John King, different guys go through their struggles. They go through their strong periods, and I just think that's going to be a continued revolving door the rest of the way. But when it comes to the rotation, I think that is the area of this Cardinal roster that John Mozeliak and the Cardinals front office actually has the ability to impact and try to adjust and change right now. I want to be very careful with this conversation because I know that the comments are going to already look a certain way. People saying, oh, I told you all along this wasn't sustainable, that Erick Fedde couldn't give you good outings week over week, that Miles Mikolas couldn't give you quality in the rotation week over week to sustain through a full season. And look, you're 100% right when you look at some of the underlying numbers that you could have expected a couple of these guys in the rotation to come back down to earth. The extent to which it has happened, though, for Erick Fedde, I even think his detractors, if they were being honest with themselves, would say this is beyond the pale to what even a normal crash back down to earth would have looked like. To give up a touchdown in 2 consecutive outings, and then on Sunday Night Baseball, to give up 4 walks in the first inning and a third. Basically, he walked as many batters as he got outs on Sunday night before Oliver Marmol, with the off day coming up Monday, said enough is enough. I'm going to bring in the bullpen and try to see if we can't salvage this thing. Now, obviously, the bullpen struggled too. The Cardinals gave up at least 1 run in each of the first 5 innings to the Cubs, and from there, they never scored. So as much as the offense is going to have to answer for some of these struggles, or the Cardinals aren't going to be going anywhere favorable in the weeks and months ahead, the pitching was something that we were going to focus on from Sunday night because, again, I think it's the one area that Mo has an opportunity to impact. The way that it would happen is simply Michael McGreevy coming up, and I probably won't do a full down on the farm today with no Monday games being played, but I will tell you from Sunday in Memphis, Michael McGreevy gave up 8 runs. He increased his season ERA to like 3.2 after it had been comfortably in the 2s for AAA ERA Michael McGreevy. So it's not that Michael McGreevy is necessarily going to come in and be this guy that's automatically superior to what you've seen from Erick Fedde over the course of the year, which is an ERA. I think he's still in the 4s, but it's growing in rapid fashion. The ERA is 4.79. Michael McGreevy, just to be 100% clear about this, for the big league season, has an ERA of 4.22 in his 21 innings pitched. So I don't know that he's going to just automatically be substantially better than what the season-long numbers are for Fedde. But again, this is a conversation for Fedde that has come up recently. It is the case that a lot of folks would have said all throughout the year, hey, he's not going to be able to sustain this. And look, you were right, and I thought you'd be right as well. I did not anticipate Fedde And again, if you're going to go in the comments and say, I saw it coming, that it was going to be 18 runs or whatever he's given up over his past 3 starts and wasn't able to get through the second inning in the game on Sunday, then congratulations, you hit the nail on the head. But I think also, if we're honest with ourselves, 3.5 was his ERA before the last 3 starts, and that was basically Sonny Gray territory at the time. I think Sonny has since improved his numbers a little bit to where he's better than that now. But Erick Fedde was doing exactly what the Cardinals brought him in to do. He was pitching to contact. He was getting enough soft contact and effectiveness with his pitches that you can hide the homers and the walks that he was giving up on occasion, and he was at least keeping the Cardinals in the game more often than not. But now 3 times in a row, he failed to do that. That is a more substantial decline than anything that we had seen from either Erick Fedde or really Miles Mikolas before this recent stretch. And Mikolas, I'm not really quite to the same point with Mikolas, which is weird to say because I think prior to 3 weeks ago, Mikolas was probably the less productive pitcher. Mikolas, before his last 2 starts, which have both been bad, he was a 4.31 ERA, which was still capable, but it wasn't the 3.54 ERA that we saw from Erick Fedde prior to his last 3 outings, which are all very, very bad. Miles Mikolas now over his past 2 has given up 6 runs against the Guardians in a game the Cardinals won, and then, of course, he gave up a record 6 home runs, 8 total earned runs in the game on July 4th on Friday at Wrigley. His ERA is now 5.26. He's not pitching well. Don't get me wrong. I'd be more inclined to give Miles Mikolas one more look this week at Busch Stadium than I would Erick Fedde, because I think we've seen before from Mikolas where he has those games where it just looks completely brutal, and then he goes on a stretch where he'll give you 3, 4, 5 starts in a row and give up fewer than 3 earned runs or fewer than 4 earned runs, which is not to necessarily say that he is completely dominant even on his good days, because he's not. But in the context of the Cardinals rotation, you can get away with Miles Mikolas going 5 innings and giving up 3 runs, going 5 2/3 and giving up 3 or 4 runs. That's still a bad ERA. It's still going to be an ERA above 5 more often than not. But it's also the way that the rotation is structured. And again, this isn't by design that the Cardinals came in and said, this is what we want for our rotation. It's more of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, if the egg is the version of your rotation that you just kind of know day one is going to be very low upside, but hopefully has a decent enough floor that the bottom doesn't drop out, then the egg came first in this instance, because that's what the Cardinals knew would be the case coming into 2025. And it's not that they were preferring it, but they were realizing that we're just going to play out some of these contracts because ownership is not going to spend money to continue to put another Band-Aid on it after the current Band-Aids aren't very exciting, right? Mikolas was brought in with that additional contract extension that he didn't need, but now you're at the end of it and you're already paying him, so you might as well see if you can't get some number 5 level starter production from him this year, right? That's what they thought, because they didn't have to pay any new contracts to settle for that. They settled for it. But in many ways, it was by the more recent version of a design. The previous design was pretty lackluster, but it's what they had, and so they said, let's just let these contracts clear. Let's see what we get from some of the internal options like Michael McGreevy that are going to step in and have opportunities when inevitably somebody gets injured from the rotation. But in a crazy stroke of, I guess you could call it good fortune, the Cardinals have not had anybody get injured from the rotation. Now, at a minimum, it is decided to pretend that they did. Erick Fedde, to me, you go Phantom IL, you do what you have to do to get him out of the current rotation and then resettle it at the All-Star break and try to figure things out with the benefit of some rest for your guys. I think 3 weeks ago, people would have said, Erick Fedde probably has a little bit of a modicum of trade value where you could move him before the deadline, slot McGreevy in, and that would be something that at least helps you get the starts for the guy that you want to check out for the future. But I think the Cardinals to this point have been hesitant to do anything like that because, A, up until recently, Mikolas and Fedde were giving you requisite production from the number 4 and number 5 spot of your rotation. We've talked, too, about Palante being more like a number 4, number 5 type as well. He's looked better recently to where I think you're pretty confidently labeling him as the number 3 at present terms, and Liberatore's your 2, Sonny is your number 1. I'm not saying that it's a great rotation, but it's been keeping you in the mix for the most part until recently, and now I do think when the underlying numbers are suddenly matching what all along you thought the outward production would be, that is the time to act, because the rest of the roster is enough to have the Cardinals currently sitting on this off day at 5 games above 500. They're 6.5 out in the Central, but they're right there just a sniff from being able to lock down a third wild card position. So there's still a lot worthwhile riding on this season, even though coming into the year with this strategy of, we're going to kind of see what it looks like with the rotation, and we're going to throw Libby in there and see if he can't turn into somebody viable for the future, because, this is kind of a pieces and parts roster that doesn't have depth behind it, and it doesn't have necessarily what it needs on paper to be a true contending roster. But if a few things break in our direction, hey, maybe it'll work out. We'll surprise some people. And frankly, the Cardinals have done that. But now that the foundation is sort of there to where I don't think anybody's looking at this Cardinals team and saying, yep, it's 3 to 5 years and a full-scale tear-down rebuild away from being contending caliber. I don't think anybody looks at the roster right now and says that. There are things you don't like about it, 100% as a fan base, and I think that's totally fair. But I think they're closer than maybe a lot of folks would have given credit for. And I don't know if that's a product of John Mozeliak, maybe, better player acquisition, better drafting and development than maybe the Cardinals were given credit for, or maybe it's just about the same and they're being managed pretty effectively, despite what a lot of people would say. Look, Oliver Marmol is going to start Miles Mikolas and start Erick Fedde over the weekend at Busch because that's what he had to do. Those are 2 of his 5 starting pitchers that the front office has given him. That's why a lot of the impetus behind this podcast for me today, this episode of B-Schaeff Daily, is to deliver the message to John Mozeliak that maybe it's already in the works, but it's time for Mo to do his job. He's got to do his part. A lot of what has made the Cardinals successful this year has been sort of a hands-off approach that was cast from ownership on down, saying, hey, the Cardinals aren't going to spend very much money. The Cardinals are just going to roll into the season with what they've got, and they're going to hope that some of the young talent or, mid-range age type of talent like Donovan, who's an all-star, by the way, deserving, Lars Nootbaar, etc., that those guys are going to be able to take the next step, and that a Contreras and Arenado are going to still have enough left in the tank. They tried to get Arenado to be traded to save more money. Didn't work out. Now he's still here. Hey, maybe he can be productive. Can Nolan Gorman take a step? Can Jordan Walker take a step? Can Liberatore become a starter? All these questions that you're like, is the bullpen going to be the same as it was last year? Or is it going to struggle? Yet all these questions, valid questions, that I think if you added them up, you would have said, the Cardinals are going to be hovering around 500, maybe a little bit below. Maybe they sell off at the deadline and they get even worse over the final couple of months of the season. I said this is an 83 to 84 win team. For a while, they were even outpacing my expectations. Technically still are by win percentage of what the season could be. But very clearly right now, they are in a downturn. And I think as much as we can look at the offense and have legit concerns, personally, I think it's attrition. I think they're worn down. I think they're a little bit banged up. Guys like Contreras, not 100%. Arenado, clearly not 100%. Lars Nootbaar, not 100%. But that's just the nature of a baseball season. You're going to have those ups and downs. They've got to find a way to grind through them as a collective unit. If they don't, they're not going to score enough runs. Just point blank, it's going to be true. They don't have minor league depth. They don't have right-handed hitters that are ready to emerge. It's why you have had to deal with guys like Ryan Vilade and Jose Barrero and Garrett Hampson taking at bats for this baseball club. They don't have the depth. Yes, that falls on John Mozeliak, but it's something we knew was true coming into the year. And they went with like a haphazard attempt to bring in some guys like a Vilade into the minor league organization to see if at some point he could spark something at the big league level. They rolled with a Lukenbaker who wasn't productive in the time that he was with the club. They have gotten some nice productivity out of Joel Pozo, and so he's still kicking around at the big league level. The catcher position, they're not getting a lot of productivity from. They replaced Goldschmidt with Contreras because they felt like they didn't have the reliable options for first base that they maybe did behind the plate. Ivan Herrera's looked great offensively, but now he's hurt again. Probably not a catcher full-time anytime in the future because he can't stay healthy. And if it's knee and leg injuries, that's even more of a reason to question it. Like, all these things are kind of happening, and the organization's having to juggle and balance them. But everything that you can say from a negative, the Cardinals are still a handful of games above 500 and sniffing distance from a wild card spot. So what do you have to do if you're John Mozeliak? You have to say to ownership, look, attendance has been weak this year because we knew it would be. We told everybody at the beginning of the year, don't have expectations. We're not really going to fix this club. You're going to find and identify holes in the roster, and we're going to say, yep, sorry about that. We're working on it, but it's going to have to take some time, and it's going to come from a drafting and developing perspective that we're going to have to make sure we get with the next iteration of the front office some things that are moving in the right direction. This was supposed to be a year for John Mozeliak that was kind of easy peasy because almost no matter what happened, he could say, well, we kind of knew it would be a struggle, or hey, we're outperforming expectations. But what's happened is They showed enough with this roster in the early portion of the year for us to be able to, as outsiders, say, hey, this is not a 3 to 5 rebuild type of situation. 3 to 5 years is not going to be necessary to get this thing back up and running under Chaim Bloom. You're closer than you think. Ownership, you're going to need to invest in some of these guys. You're going to need to give guys like Mason Wynn, Brendan Donovan, the contracts to be kind of the next core of this Cardinals team. You have to maybe make some tough trades of guys that you're not sure you're going to invest in long term, and so you might end up moving on from somebody. And you're going to look at the pitching and say, this is kind of a stopgap situation. Let's exhaust some of the availability and eligibility from guys like Michaelis and Fedde and Matz, and if they give you something productive, great. If they don't, hopefully by 2026, we've got enough guys in the hopper that can come up and compete for spots in spring training of 2026, whether it's Quinn Matthews or Gordon Graceffo or Michael McGreevy, who we think is kind of above those other guys because he's ready now for an opportunity despite what he did on Sunday in giving up 8 earned runs in a Memphis game. Tink Hence is another guy, right? You're kind of looking, we thought maybe Cooper Jerby, but then he's been injured with Tommy John. You've had guys that have gone down to injury. Tekoa Roby has stayed healthy. He has been promoted to AAA. You're looking at him now as somebody that should be vying for a chance come February of 2026. But those guys aren't ready yet. The moves that are being made behind the scenes and the foundation that's being laid by Chaim Bloom, Rob Serfolio, and the rest of the staff that has been brought in is going to take a little bit of time. And I think it is in the benefit of the Cardinals not to rush those guys in a year that they probably didn't expect to be very competitive anyway. But what you have now is, like I said, was on paper an easy year for John Mozeliak. He's got to do his job now. He's got to look at this and say, we're ahead of schedule of what the public expected. And frankly, if you can have anything close to league average production from the number 4 and number 5 spot of your rotation right now, you might actually be able to sneak into the playoffs. And attendance has been down, but I'm telling you what, if you find playoff games at Busch, it's going to be something that people are willing to invest in. And even if it doesn't lead to a world championship in 2025, it could maybe lead to a refresh and a recharge of the fan base's enthusiasm. But what you're risking right now when you continue to throw guys like Fedde and Michaelis to the wolves is apathy that has already kind of set into the fan base a bit, but doesn't need to be there permanently if John Mozeliak, on the way out, decides to go out with a bit of a bang. And I'm not saying you should trade the world away in terms of future assets and prospects, but I think it is owed to not only the fan base, but to the rest of the roster that has produced a 5 games above 500 record to this point to try and find a way to do something a little bit more productive with the back end of your rotation. Right now, to me, that means Erick Fedde doesn't start at Busch this week. I don't care how it happens. I'm not necessarily saying it would be wise to just DFA him. I cannot imagine he has any trade value right now, but I think Michael McGreevy takes that start. I am not necessarily saying he's going to be extremely productive. I think Michael McGreevy probably has a career ERA around what it is right now, 4 to 4.2. I think he's a number 3, number 4 type of starter in the rotation. He pitches to contact just like a lot of these other guys do. He has grown over the past calendar year to put more strikeout stuff into his arsenal, but I don't know that it's going to be consistently available to him at the big league level. But I think he's a competitor. I think he's a guy who can grind and can get the most out of the talent that he has. And I really respect Michael McGreevy as a pitcher, as a competitor, and as somebody who is working for everything that he gets at the professional levels. That being said, I just want to offer the word of caution that although I am advocating for, hey, it's deep enough in the calendar now, and finally Fedde is costing you in a way that he goes out there to pitch, you know you're losing that baseball game. It's been true 3 times in a row right now. That is a degree beyond what I felt was reasonable for the Cardinals to continue to put up with. And so whether it's an IL stint or something more permanent, Fedde shouldn't start this week. I think we all know it at this point, and I think there's not anybody who doesn't know it. The only person, though, that has the ability to do something about it is John Mozeliak. It's not Oliver Marmol. Oliver Marmol is going to have to roll Erick Fedde out there in 5 days if John Mozeliak doesn't give him an alternative. So we're going to wait and see what happens. My prediction is that Fedde will not start again for the Cardinals before the All-Star break. I'm not saying they're going to just dump him. Maybe there's something they can identify that's a reason physically that he's dealing with, and you can IL him and kick the can down the road a little bit. I'm not saying you would even do that with an expectation that he's going to turn things around, but he might. He might just be experiencing sort of a dead arm period of his summer, and the Cardinals may need to give him a little bit of rest. People wouldn't be excited about that, but I think it's the appropriate measure. I think not doing anything permanent just yet, but making sure that while Erick Fedde is just non-competitive for your team for the last 3 starts, you go with somebody else, I think is an appropriate measure to be taken. I don't know that, again, you can't, I said phantom IL. Obviously, he's going to have something real and physical that he's dealing with. My belief is that pitchers throughout the league have enough aches and pains going on right now that you could justify a 15-day IL stint for Erick Fedde or just about anybody else if you felt it was necessary to do so. That's what I believe John Mozeliak has to do. Again, it was supposed to be kind of an easy year for him, where maybe there wasn't a lot that you'd be able to criticize. We know that John Mozeliak has felt in the past like he gets a hard time from fans, like he gets a little bit of a hard time from the media, which, again, fans would turn around and say, no, the media is soft and doesn't ever criticize or do what they need to. But, Mozeliak has at times felt like the media is rough on him. But I would say right now you've got to look at what's happening and just take some action, because that is the job description. At least for a few more months, that's what John Mozeliak has to be able to do in this final season of him at the helm. And I think that the players who are capable and have proven that, hey, this is still an above 500 team and it's a competitive team, and I think the fans, I think that's who deserves John Mozeliak to take some action. And it's not as though you're hindering the future of the organization by giving McGreevy a more extended look in Erick Fedde's spot right now. Because Erick Fedde was not designed or destined to be on this team beyond September or October of 2025. So McGreevy slots in. You take the lumps with McGreevy. That's something the fan base has to recognize. There's a lot of people hating on Ollie Marmol for throwing Fedde and Michaelis out there. If McGreevy comes up and it's a struggle, it's a learning curve and a learning process, you have to be willing to live with that because that's who they've got. Again, does it reflect on the organization that their depth is not such that they're able to look at guys like Fedde and Michaelis to this point and say, we've definitely got guys that are better down below who are major league ready? Yeah, it's a reflection of the organization. That's why you're making the substantial changes and bringing in Chaim Bloom and empowering him to make the hires that he has to really overhaul things at the infrastructure level of the organization. Like, that's why all that's happened. Yes, there are deficits when it comes to organizational depth, and they've got to fix it. But it wasn't going to happen in the way that they had been trying to do it previously, which was just buy free agents, pay market value, and hope that it worked out, because they weren't able to get the boulder all the way up to the top of the hill in doing that. It kept rolling back down on them in 2023 and 2024. So they're doing it differently now. It will take some time, but you have enough talent on the major league roster. It's not a perfect roster, but there's enough talent there to say, hey, you know what, a small supplementation of that doesn't necessarily, hamstring you for future considerations to a great degree. Find those moves coming up over the next 3 weeks and utilize your ability in those markets to make something happen for the Cardinals. That's what I think should happen here. But you've at least got McGreevy, and then if we have to continue having a conversation after Michaelis' next start, you say, can Steven Matz be somebody that we look to in potentially longer stints, even though there's plenty of risk associated with that idea? It gets to the point where I don't think you can be static. I don't think you can just make no changes to the way things are going, because quickly you will find that instead of being a team handily above 500, you're right back down to mediocrity, and the record would show it. Right now, I think the play over the past week is showing that, but they've built up enough goodwill with their record that they're still 5 games up. They are still in a position where a wild card is attainable. The division is probably not attainable unless the Cardinals beat up specifically on the Cubs the rest of the way, and the Cubs come back down to earth a little bit. But they're a talented roster with pitching that is far outpacing the Cardinals, and they've got more power hitters. They've got a little bit more of everything right now, and so we'll see if that's something that they can land. But there's still value in trying to make a run at a wild card, in my opinion, and without mortgaging the future, I think it is owed to the rest of the folks in the organization to not allow what we're currently seeing from Erick Fedde to continue. So let me know your thoughts on this, Cardinals fans. I'm sure you will have plenty, and we'll continue to monitor the situation and head into a new homestand. I'll be down at the ballpark on Tuesday night for Cardinals Nationals. But appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in, for listening. Check out the membership subscription to the B-Schaeff Daily Brenden Schaeffer channel in the video description below if that's something that interests you as a way to support the content here on B-Schaeff Daily. But thank you guys so much for watching, for listening, and we will talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.